Welcome, everyone. I'm sorry, the light is really bright in my eyes. Welcome on behalf of Public Programs and the CUNY Graduate Center and the PhD program in Art History. I'm so thrilled to be introducing tonight's much anticipated event, which has been organized in collaboration with Dia Center for the Arts, where Steve McQueen is currently showing old and new work. I'm so thrilled we could pull off this event rather last minute. A little bit of blurb about the Graduate Center for those of you who don't know. We are CUNY's hub for doctoral education, and we offer over 50 doctoral and master's programs and over 30 centers and institutes of advanced research. We are a public graduate school, and central to our mission is bringing new knowledge to the city's publics. And the PhD program in Art History is, I would say, one of the flagship departments of the Graduate Center. And we have had an ongoing collaboration with Dia Center for the Arts for the last 10 years. Last time Paul Gilroy was here was in the context of an event to celebrate the Black Atlantic at 20. That was back in 2013. So Paul, welcome back. And Steve as well, big welcome. Your poignant installations and films are also a touchstone for our thinking. So just a few words about housekeeping. Please silence your phones, obviously, but feel free to take photos, I guess. You will have, you've got little bits of card, I think, on which to write questions. You were given these when you came into the auditorium. Around 7:40, these cards will be collected by a team of people who will bring them to me and Donna to sift through, and then we will give these questions to our speakers. Please write clearly and keep them concise. And we estimate that the Q&A will start around 8 p.m. And I'm now going to hand over to Donna DeSalva, who is Senior Adjunct Curator of Special Projects at Dia, and who will introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Good evening, and on behalf of the Dia Art Foundation, I'd like to welcome you this evening to a conversation with Steve McQueen and Paul Gilroy. We're delighted to be partnering with the CUNY Graduate Center on tonight's presentation, and I want to express our deep appreciation to Claire Bishop, Presidential Professor in Art History at the Graduate Center, Karen Sanders, Director of Public Programs, and Jimmy Koch, Events Coordinator. Our gratitude goes to Marion Goodman Gallery, especially Rose Lord and Linda Pellegrini. And at Dia, I'm indebted to my colleagues Kim Golding and Emily Markert for all their efforts organizing tonight's conversation. Above all, we want to thank Paul Gilroy and Steve McQueen for making the effort to join us here tonight on this side of the pond and to share some of their years-long dialogue. Paul and Steve will focus tonight primarily on Steve's work, Base. You've seen images of it here and other works by Steve scrolling on the screen behind me, co-commissioned by Dia and the Laurenz Foundation, Schaulager Basel. The project was co-curated by me, Emily Markert, and Randy Gibson. Base remains on view at Dia Beacon until May 26th. So if you haven't already seen it, don't miss the opportunity to do so. You will really regret it. A second iteration of Base will be presented at Schaulager this June, and there's a concurrent installation featuring several of Steve's projects, but especially a 2-channel video, Sunshine State, and that's on view in Dia Chelsea until July 18th. Steve describes himself as an artist who makes films. He's been the recipient of numerous awards, including the Turner Prize and an Academy Award for Best Picture. He emerged during the 1990s with groundbreaking videos that critically achieved the histories of cinema and video. Trained as a painter, who also makes sculptures, Steve considers both the projected image and the space it occupies as his work, or as the critic and curator Oakley and Weiser has written, the work is grounded in the attempt to undo the predictability of the film frame as image alone. As conceived for the Dia Beacon spaces, Base comprises 2 of the most fundamental elements of film, light and sound. Steve's been thinking a lot about the nature of Base and its links to Black culture, the African diaspora, and the horrific journey of the Middle Passage, where, as he has said, all they had was sound. Paul writes about this in his landmark 1993 text, The Black Atlantic, Modernity and Double Consciousness, and I quote, "With no clear beginning nor end, the music acts as an anchor to an echo of the past while reverberating into the future. Although the terrors of the Middle Passage were, quote, unspeakable, these terrors were not inexpressible. But," and I'm quoting Steve here, "bass puts the public in a situation where everyone becomes acutely sensitive to themselves. That is, it comes back to the individual with all the responsibility that that entails. This consciousness and alertness to how the past is embedded in the present is ever more present today." Paul Gilroy is one of the foremost theorists of race and racism working and teaching in the world today. He is the author of more books than I have time to go through. He is currently the Emeritus Professor of Humanities and was the founding director of the Sarah Parker Redmond Center for the Study of Racism and Racialization at University College London. He's also written numerous essays on the work of Steve, with whom, as I said, he's had this decades-long friendship and dialogue. He has also written for the catalogue Base, which plug, it is on sale outside. He's also the recipient of the 2019 Holberg Prize, given to a person who has made outstanding contributions to research in the arts, humanities, social science, law, or theology. Please join me in welcoming Paul Gilroy and Steve McQueen.
Difficult to know where to start, really, after that.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that for a very long time, actually, so it's
Me neither.
Jude.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's this trance, isn't it? It's this trance, it's this sort of, I mean, the reason why, I mean, you know, hope you got, not too pissed off, it's a long clip. I was told it should be 4 minutes, Steve. No, I've played the whole clip. The whole idea of, again, it's the trance, it's the willing dermishes, it's the getting into it, it's coming off the streets, sitting down and, starts again, you play it again, rewind again, it's to get into that sort of state of mind. I mean, that's the thing to be in a state of mind, yeah.
When I saw it the first time, and I was thinking about it subsequently tonight, because it really brought to mind something James Baldwin said, and I had the great pleasure of interviewing him towards the end of his life. I had the great pleasure of interviewing James Baldwin towards the end of his life and talking to him about his friendship with Roy Ayers and things like that. May he rest in power. And James had written something which I really comes into my mind when I watch that clip. I'm going to read it to you and see how you react to it. Music is our witness and our ally. The beat is the confession which recognizes, changes, and conquers time. Then history becomes a garment we can wear and share, and not a cloak in which to hide. And this is the punchline now coming. And time becomes a friend. Time becomes a friend. So I think a lot of what's at stake in the music is that possibility of becoming placed in a friendly relationship with time, and the way that musical time, music is our witness and our ally, but it's the beat that's the confession that recognizes, changes, and conquers time. So I think time's being conquered. For me, musical time and other kinds of time are being interlaced in that encounter, resonant sound.
I mean, when I was, these things were called blues parties. My mother went to blues parties in the 60s and stuff, and it was people worked for the blues, as you know. They used to sort of, my mum used to get a pattern for a dress. People used to work all week to go to the blues. And again, the blues in the 60s were very different from the blues in the 70s and the 80s. And when I went to blues, it was the tail end of something like this. When I was into blues, it was more American music. It was more sort of soul music. And also there was things called rare groove. We used to call rare groove, which was old sort of, these James Brown tracks where people would sort of this sort of hypnotic beat would be going on. These sort of these like I say plates, these sort of 45s. And there was, I said the time was, what was interesting about, I don't know, just responding to what you just said, what was interesting about those situations was, it was, I remember my cousin, he said, oh, what time do you go to blues? Well, as a child, I was like, what time are you going out? Well, I come in at 12 o'clock. I said, I'm in the shower at 12 o'clock. It would always be, to get to a blues, to get to a good blues, you'd be 2 o'clock. That would be just about right. It'd be a little bit, maybe even too early. 2 o'clock at a blues. So it was about that time where maybe people were asleep and we were awake, that we could do things in this space where we felt free to do things. We could do things because eyes weren't on us, And
do you think that's where the seeds of the Bass project were planted, first of all, then? Does it go back to that memory of sound and music in...
Yeah, it's always a muffle, because when I went out with my mother and father, again, because everybody went to a party, and when the young children, what happened was you used to get to do, it was a blues, but it was at a friend's house. So I used to be in the bedroom, and I'll wake up, and there'll be piles of coats all over me, and there'll be this bass, this thud, the bass line. The sort of distorted, the sort of muffled sound, yeah. And I think, again, it's one of those situations where you feel it. Anyway, the bass at Dia, it sort of started. Anyway, it didn't start here, but it started in some ways with a conversation with Oakley. And no, it did not actually. It did not. It started with a conversation. And you remember this, Rose, Lord. It started with a conversation with Ornette Coleman. Ah. Weirdly enough, I had this conversation. I wanted to work with Ornette Coleman. Why don't you? And I met him. And it was all of Ornette there in this room. And we started talking. And to talk to Ornette Coleman at first was it was extremely difficult, because it was like trying to tune a radio, because I didn't understand what he was saying, and he was like just twiddling this knob and its wavelength to sort of get into his wavelength, and he was saying things to me, I didn't understand what he was saying. I was holding on, and all of a sudden, I got something. It was static, and I got something. I got in. And what he said to me, and he repeated this thing, that's the one thing I kept to remember. He said, my mother didn't give me anything, and my father didn't give me anything. My mother didn't give me anything, and my father didn't give me anything. I was like, what? And I was like, I somehow... And I was like, wow. And we would talk a little longer. And there was this radio dial I was trying to get. I said, okay, wonderful, wonderful. And I thought, you know what? I'm not ready yet. And it's only when I forgot about that conversation. That was, when was that? That was 20 years ago. That was 2000 and 2000, was it 2000, 2002? I think it was 2002. I think it was 2002, 2003. 2003, that was 2003, I think, even. And I forgot about that conversation, and fast forward now to, Munich, and with Oakley, and we're talking, and he says, he talked to me about the abstraction in my work. We start talking. And I had this idea, because he was doing this biennial, and he said, look, I want you to participate. And I said, okay, well, I had this idea, and the idea was to bring these sort of, what it was sort of musicians from the diaspora, to be in West Africa, but also get them on a vessel and basically sail over the ocean, sail across the Atlantic,
Right.
to somewhere like Bahia or somewhere in South America, and in that moment create music. The whole idea of traveling and sound that travels and light that travels, and being on a boat, on a vessel, sort of tracing those steps of the transatlantic slave trade. And we had this conversation, and he died.
Right.
And I kind of put it away.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could go on, but that was it. And then I did this thing called Sunshine State, and that came into play in all of this. But please go on.
And that's the piece of work which is at Dia in Chelsea,
Yes.
which covers your father's experience, your father's traumatic experience
Yes.
of racialized violence in the context of his life as a migrant picker of oranges in
Yes.
Florida. Like
Yes.
many Caribbean people went to Florida to be involved in managing the orange crop.
Yes, and I think that's where the Ornette Coleman thing comes in, actually, because the whole idea of my father, I don't think what Ornette was saying in a way that it wasn't negative, it was a positive about his parents. They didn't give him the weight of their past somehow. I felt that's what he was saying. But I think it's almost like they didn't give him anything. As in, they gave him, by not giving him a certain weight, he received something. He was free, exactly. So when my father, and I said it twice, he held me tight at the end. If you haven't seen the piece, please see it. It makes sense. It made sense to me. It didn't make sense to me for a long time, but then it makes sense to me.
Okay. Well, so you assembled. Now we've got Ornette Coleman as an ancestral figure for your project, because traditions make themselves by choosing ancestors, right? So we've now got him there. And then you chose some other actors, some other agents, some other collaborators, and you brought them together. Marcus Miller, obviously, who's someone who's altered the language of the bass as an instrument in popular music. Michel Ndegio cello, Aston Barrett Jr. From Jamaica, or Florida, wherever he's.
Yeah, he's Family Man's son, Bob Marley's bassist son. Yeah.
Mamadou Kouyaté and Laura Simone Martin.
Yeah, Laura.
So what's the young African-American double bass player? So what about the process? How did you begin the work of improvising and composing spontaneously with this incredibly diverse but also connected group of musicians?
Well, the first person I asked was Marcus to come along, and I just had a conversation with him. I mean, we had this kind of relationship since 12 Years a Slave. We had this kind of conversation going on from afar. And then I just told him about the idea. He was into it. And I said, I just basically love the idea of having an orchestra of bassists, of different kinds of bassists. I wanted to get someone from West Africa, someone from South America, obviously North America, to bring together some kind of diaspora and what can happen, but also to start off with this journey, the whole idea of the middle passage, the whole idea of that. So again, it came back to the idea I had before, but it wasn't about a vessel. It was about just getting people together and bringing them into a space. And then Marcus sort of helped me with some of the musicians. I got Aston, the Family Man's, because I wanted Bob Marley's bassist, Family Man, but unfortunately he was ill at that time, right. And his son Aston was his prodigy. So we got him in, and the funny thing is, none of them had met before. I mean, no, two of them had met before. Marcus knew. Then Michelle, but none of them hadn't actually met at all until we had them at Dia.
Right.
And then what happened was that we had conversations, a Zoom conversation with each individual person. But when we came together, it was just about having a conversation about what I wanted to do them to do, or what I wanted them to sort of, what their journeys were individually, and what we were trying to do. And Marcus was pretty, again, there's a certain kind of confidence one has. As soon as I walked into the room with these artists, I just knew we would have something.
Were the light
Yes.
boxes in place when they went in to perform in there?
Half of the light boxes were in place,
Right.
so therefore we did all the color changes we put them in the space where it was. So basically they were playing their instruments during the time of the transition of the lights. And it was just having these kind of conversations at the beginning. We had like maybe a 20-minute conversation, brought them out into the space with the lights, and then we started to sort of to improvise and play, and pretty straight away, things just started to happen. We had 3 days. The second day, I think we were thinking of going to a recording studio, but what was happening was so extraordinary in that space, the feedback, whatever, and obviously the lights. We thought, no, let's stay there. And Donna was there, and it was just one of those things where, Marcus would say something he would start off with something, and then they would come in, and then I would say something about the space, and that was it. And literally, within 10 minutes, we started to play. It's crazy. I mean, honestly, it was like that.
I mean, I was struck today looking at the piece, because I hadn't seen it before, it's not about sound. It's not about sound. It's with the sound. But in a way, the mood, the incredible tonality of the light, of the different frequencies of light, is almost, at times it dominates. At times it dominates the sound of the music and the performance. There's a kind of very delicate equilibrium, it seems to me, established in the experience of the sound and the light coming together.
Well, I think a note and a color, because there are colors and there's notes. And I think maybe colors and temperature, and a note in different sort of space of temperature does certain things, different things at different times. So I wouldn't necessarily say it dominates. I would say it's a chain reaction. It's a reaction to what one is hearing. It ricochets off, rather.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of... the room itself has a set of acoustic properties that promote a kind of... it's on the edge. It feels dubby at times. It feels very dubby at times, but that's not the overall mood that's established there. There's just it's a very disturbing and hypnotic experience over a long period of time. So do go and have a look and a listen, and a breath in there. It was very striking to me. Of course, it made me think a lot about, Linton and Linton's attempt to try to name the musical cultures that we have been talking about and which we're all familiar with. Linton gave them a name, and that name was bass culture.
Yeah, that's Linton Kwesi Johnson, yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that and about trying to name it through the bass frequencies, the low end, and what a low end theory might be to make sense of that. And it's curious that a poet is the one that put the name on it.
Yes, yeah. Interesting enough, I was talking to Linton yesterday, and he's just doing something with Dennis. He's producing a new album, and he doesn't want to write lyrics. I said, "How do you not want to write lyrics? You're a poet." So he's again, it's this sort of he's taking away. It's I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on there, but it's what is it? It is the heart. It is obviously it is the heartbeat. It is the heartbeat. It is the immersion. It is the sort of the freedom. It is this again. I never forget when we were doing research with 12 Years a Slave, and I was walking by Congo Square, and this was the last place in North America that you're allowed to play the drum. It was the last place. They took the drum away because people went crazy. People with the drum, they started killing slave owners. So they took the drum away. So it goes without saying. There's a certain kind of again. There's a certain sort of how can I say tonality. There's a certain sort of sense of wavelength. There's a certain kind of progression, and progression.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And of course, bass frequencies are not perceived by our heads in the same way as other frequencies are. I think there's obviously a whole tradition in African American life of talking about listening with more than your ears. And I think that I was very struck in the room how the higher end of what the basses can do is very directional, but the low end is not directional at all. So it disturbs your whole sensory apparatus.
Oh yeah, it puts you off balance for sure. It sort of puts you off tilter. Absolutely, but that's what it's supposed to do. It brings you into another dimension, into another way of dealing with space, of dealing with time, and of dealing with one's own perception of themselves. That's where you get the freedom from. I think, again, I remember Stuart Hall saying, if it wasn't for blues, I mean, you know, it wasn't for blues during a certain part of the time in UK under Thatcher's government, you know, there have been a lot of people who, you know, again, certain kinds of states of mind would not be safe. We needed that.
Well, you put
Altered reality. Well, is it an altered reality? Or maybe it is a reality. It's a reality rather than an altered reality.
Well, you put electricity into this story, and that's important too, it seems to me, to electrify it, and what electricity and amplification bring. Because I was expecting the installation to be loud, to be really, really loud. Most of the time it's not loud. It's taking you through this whole spectrum of volumes and intensities. It's not, it gets loud for a moment, but it's not, I was expecting it to be loud in the sense of you know, that thing Jimmy says about the electric church. We play loud because we need to wake people up, you know? And it's not loud in that way. It's so dynamic in its movement across levels and layers of volume. And that's why I said to you before, it's almost like asking you to learn how to listen as much as anything to do with the perception of color and time.
I mean, I've been there when people, you get very still. I mean, again, obviously people do things differently, but I get very still when I'm there, and I sit and I just listen, or I walk around. It's much more pensive than anything else.
Well, of course, the electric bass is a very 20th century invention. It's a very 20th century phenomenon. You know, it comes out really in the middle of that. And I thought one thing when I was writing my piece for the catalogue was I found that the first record that had been recorded featuring an electric bass with Montgomery as a member of the Art Farmer Sextet was called Mau Mau. And I don't know if people are familiar with that track by Art Farmer, Mau Mau, the first record to feature an electric bass, but I just thought for a moment or two we could listen to it and see what that revolution sounds like in its emergent moment. Yeah, I was surprised that I didn't know about that record before. Perhaps it's old news to people, but it was interesting to know where that had come from, you know. And of course, that's I think 21 or 22-year-old Quincy Jones playing the piano and writing that arrangement.
He's everywhere.
I mean, some people. I think it was it was Monk Montgomery, I think, who said the bass was, no, it was James Jamerson. It was James Jamerson, a Motown bass player, who said the bass was a bastard instrument. And there's quite a good book by Brian Wright called The Bastard Instrument, which is, I think, the first book that really tries to tell you the history of the electric bass. And
Great, no father, fantastic. Absolutely. I remember Quincy saying to me, the electric bass changed music, and he knew because he was on that record.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously the culture of sound systems and everything has been so transformed in a way. I sat there today listening and looking and feeling in that room and thinking, what does this sound like to people who are used to listening to music on headphones, you know? That seemed to me to be, that's why I said, even though it's not loud in terms of waking you up, it's asking you to wake up in other ways to the demands, to the opportunities that a kind of deep listening provides you.
I just felt that it's one of those spaces where you're allowed to listen, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You're told to listen. You said you're allowed to listen, you have to learn to listen. And again, it's a space what maybe people have been asking for, but then you bump into. And I think it's kind of disarming. And that's what I mean by pentative, because I think it's kind of disarming because often, you're not allowed. I won't say it's not a case of allowed. It's not given in that way. Music is given obviously mainly through this. Mm. I mean, this stereo at someone's home, that doesn't happen anymore. I don't know. I mean, again, so therefore, to have this expansive space which allows you to move within it and to experience the sound within it is obviously is different. And it's not a discotheque, as it were. It's not a space which is unlike any other. It's of itself and its base.
Well, I spent some time talking to the docents about it, the people who are in with the work all the time, because I wanted to know what they had seen and what they had noticed. And they're obviously the most acute anthropologists with regard to the way that the piece of art functions in that room, because they're in there more than anyone else. And they did report to me that there had been dancing in that room, which I was pleased to learn. They also said that they had, on other occasions or other phases in the cycle, which is a very slow cycle of changing sound and light, they had also seen people being very amorous. And they, at other occasions, had seen people going to sleep because they were entranced, quite literally, by the combination of sensory experiences that they encountered there.
A safety. I think that's again, we go back to a place of safety. I think that's in some ways with the music, I'm talking to musicians and wanting a certain kind of journey. And again, at a certain point, it kind of lulls. It lulls you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I feel that in some ways, the whole idea of the middle passage was a starting point. It's not the end point. It's a starting point. It's the runway, and then when we have takeoff, we get somewhere else. Similar to all kinds of, black endeavors, because it all starts from a certain point slavery, but then they go somewhere else. It's a starting point. It's a gravity, which needs to be sort of, and dealing with gravity is what we do and what we try to defy. It's always weight and how we sort of deal with that weight in one way, shape, form, or the other.
Yeah, I mean, Baldwin said and wrote that not so much about the middle passage as the point of initiation, but he talks about the music beginning on the auction block. Music beginning on the auction block, in this sense that, the captor requires of the captive a song, to borrow the biblical phrase, by the rivers of Babylon, etc. And there's also a lot of writing in the 19th century by people who'd been enslaved about the role of music and sound in their own experience, both of slavery, enslavement, and of freedom too. So I'm wondering about the auction block as the place that the sound comes from, you know.
Yeah, I think.
Well,
yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, I just think it starts in that vessel. It starts in that vessel with that, the hull, the hull of the vessel. That's where it starts. The first thing you're doing is scratching. You're knocking. That's where I think, if anything, that's where it starts. That abstraction, that reaction is where it comes from. Then, of course, maybe it's, but that first,
percussive
resistance as such. Yeah, that's where it first comes from, I feel.
Well, of course, no more the spiritual "No More Auction Block" for me is the song that We Shall Overcome. It generates "We Shall Overcome," and it generates a number of other popular songs. So it's not as if with each iteration there's a loss of life. It's accretion. There's growth. Things expand and increase as the reach grows and as the electricity offers the conduit for that culture of freedom to expand and cross borderlands and loop back to its places of origin in a really kind of complex and beautiful pattern.
Yeah. For me, the most important thing about this sort of thing is that the fact that the sound travels. And where it ends up, we don't know. I mean, I just heard Love Supreme. I'm sure you did too, no? Yeah. I mean, hello? I mean, in fact, it was Paul who initially told me this, but I did, oh, really? Now I'm hearing boom, 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 and it's always the baton. It's always the baton. And, in the middle of that, Quincy Jones, he's like Zelig, isn't he? My goodness. But, so this traveling of an evolution is when it gets very exciting for me, because it gets to a situation where it comes out within everything that we do. If it's within science, within art, within film, within whatever, within expression, within literature, within philosophy, because it always starts from that time. Sound, music, or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, music. But it's something which it's sort of, for me, the beginning of something. Where it ends up, I don't know.
Maybe you're more optimistic than me.
Go.
Because I worry about the loss of music in our lives, actually, about the lack of music in our lives. And I'm happy to be wrong about this, but when I see the headphones in people's ears, I worry that this experience of sound, experience of music, is actually not a social experience at all, but absolutely an individualized or an individuated experience, I mean, walking around the streets of New York, I haven't been here for over 10 years, you're still hearing music coming out of cars. and maybe there's a social thing in there, because at least you're in there with the people you want to be with, going, hopefully, to where you want to get to. But I do worry about the hemorrhaging away of a certain sociality around the music and the culture of freedom that has been entangled with over such a long period of time. And I think, these things, there are ebbs and there are falls. It's like waves. There are moments when the music's really strong and really powerful, and it's part of a culture of freedom that we can identify. And then there are times when it ebbs away.
When was the last time it happened? When was the last time that happened, do you think?
The last time something happened with music?
No, what you just said. When was the last time you think that happened?
Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? It's the Kendrick Lamar moment with the first wave of protest about police murdering African Americans, I think. I mean, I don't know that in the second iteration music was, maybe I'm looking through a telescope, I'm not here, so I don't really know. But were people singing? Have people been singing in the context of protest? I don't know if they have. It's certainly not in the ways that they were. In the 19th century, they were making books of songs to go and sing so that your solidarity worked through a shared musical practice. I've got at home a collection of songbooks from civil rights movements. I remember once at one of the book fairs in London doing a session with Bernice Reagan Johnson, who also passed away not that long ago, and talking to her about the archiving of song and the relationship of song to the freedom movement. So I'm not saying there aren't other things happening. I'm just maybe looking at them through a telescope. I'm not tuned into where to look, But I do wonder about how music might be less important than it was in earlier phases of resistance. And I know you're really interested in what it is to resist, and you want to kind of capture and feed back the history of resistance through the other project that you've been working on with images of resistance. So I'm wondering about sound and resistance. Does that seem possible?
Well, I mean, I think it's the soundtrack of it has to be. Am I up on it? Possibly not. I mean, maybe Kendrick, was that Pimp a Butterfly? Was that was something at a certain time? I mean, I imagine that other people could tell me other times, but I mean, give peace a chance with John.
Yeah,
but maybe we need a new and again, I don't think it's not there.
No,
it's just it needs to be amplified. It basically needs to come out of the phone onto the speakers. Absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, the attack on musical education is really profound, both in our country and I think here too. That actually, who gets to learn to play an instrument, and who gets to learn how to? I mean, never mind the fact that professional musicians can't make a living out of music anymore, and that alters the nature of community. And the clubs where we used to go to listen to music, when we got out of the blues dance and went to the clubs, they've all been shut.
Yeah.
So as the city changes around us, I just feel there's a kind of ecology of musical production and musical use which has been altered by present circumstances, altered by nihilism, altered by loss of hope actually in the future. People want to work on their muscles or something, but they don't really want to work on their musical practice.
No,
crudely.
No. I don't want to be like that, but I'm feeling a bit. How do that's my frustration right now. How is it? How one tackles the environment? How again? I feel it's difficult. There's no if, buts, or maybe. But then again, it's always been difficult. But it's how do you sort of navigate? How do you surf and navigate the cesspool and emerge? I think that's what I was trying to play with bass. Bringing that together again it's an amplify it at least. Again, it's one of those things where I feel that the journey, of course, is with it individually and within. And I feel that also with Sunshine State, that was very, very important as well. Just because it was confronted with something that I had, again, sometimes going backwards is not a bad thing. Not just to be so front and center. To go back to my father and him dying and him telling me this story, I had no idea all those years, and him not telling me, and the trauma, again, this word being thrown around like confetti, but the fact that my dad, avoided death and that I'm alive, and then he died, is fucking miraculous. It's pretty miraculous. And through him dying, he gave me life. Pretty miraculous. Pretty fucked up, if I may say that. So again, this heartbeat, this bass goes on, and I think again, it is to disrupt the narrative, because I would have been part of that narrative, part of his death. I would have been part of his death if I hadn't disrupted the narrative, and he didn't die. I wouldn't have been able to do that, and that's kind of heavy. It's kind of heavy.
Well, thank you. Now's the moment where we get to see what questions have been submitted for us to discuss now. So, can we have some questions, please?
We have some questions. Here's the first one, and it's for both of you. What do you think about regarding the spirit or spiritual in your work?
Well, it's kind of self-evident if you see, obviously, the first clip of Lovers Rock. It's there. It's there. It was there in Hunger with the conversation with Bobby Sands and the priest. It was there. You smell things. It's things occur, things emerge. I don't know what you would call it, spiritual or not, but there's things which are totally out of my bloody control. But all I got to do is keep the camera still, and it happens. I remember we were doing the conversation, the 17.5-minute conversation with Michael Fassbender and oh my goodness gracious, yeah, Cox, the actor doing and I knew something was happening there, similar to what happened with this thing in Lovers Rock. You can't direct that. That shit just happens. And, it just, and again, these people were what was beautiful about it is people kept the period so well. It wasn't just hab hoc. It was to the period of what was going on, in 1979, 1980. So the way they moved, the way they spoke, the way they danced within that thing, within that time. So it was strange. It was an odd thing. So that's definitely. Sometimes you just think you're a magnet and you want something so badly, it can come to you.
I mean, I think of that. There is a way of interpreting the kind of ritual and the kind of joy and the kind of community that's created around music as a spiritual thing in itself. A love supreme, if you like, but there are lots of other ways of talking about it. I suppose, in my own work, I've had to really think about the limits of Christianity as a way of finding spirituality, and to respect and to honor certain aspects of that because it's so intrinsic, it's so fundamental to the freedom story that we've been talking about, but also to see its limits and to see in the current situation both some problems and some opportunities with that. If we're looking for more resonant ways of relating to one another and relating to the world and relating to other forms of life that exist on different scales, then, sometimes the quickest route to that is through something like a spiritual path, because, indigenous peoples in the world manage to find a way to live in harmony with nature through their cosmologies, for example. And that's something that I've been really trying to write and think about in my own more recent work that I've been doing. But music, to get back to that, is really fundamental to that, to the resonance that we need and seek to make the world that we're in better, if it's not fallacious to imagine that it might be better.
I have another question, if you can. Bass puts one into a trance where time is both eternal and cyclical. Mm-hmm. Could you speak more on that continual cycle?
Well, I always think of the rotation. We're spinning on axis. We're spinning. I just think of that the whole idea of spinning and the whole idea of through that there's a certain connection, but similar to what you just said. In fact, there's a kind of connection to who we are, who we really are, a connection to a reality that we can create. I mean, we go out there, there's all kinds of things going on, but within that space, that space, there's a reality which is another one, or a one which is just as real as the one we make up for ourselves, And I think it's just healthy to be within that space, and I think that's what I was interested in, playing with Marcus, playing with his musicians. I mean, it was just incredible because people intrinsically knew what to do. It was all, for more than a better word, I hated the word improvisation. You said, what was that word you used? I love that word.
What, spontaneous composition?
Sorry?
Spontaneous composition.
Spontaneous composition. That's what was going on. And they were talking to each other, these musicians. I mean, I took the tapes back to Abbey Road. I did one. There was only one track that I edited. It was amazing. It was something which was going on in that room, and it was allowed to happen. And I think in our daily lives, you have to allow things to happen. Allow things to happen. You know. What were you saying, Paul? You were saying genius. Yourself and Von were reading this thing. Please, do you mind?
About resonance.
It's fantastic.
Thinking about how to disalienate the world through seeking and cultivating more resonant relationships with ourselves, with each others, with I mean, I know this probably sounds, in a time of war and catastrophe and brutality and all of that being affirmed, the pursuit of resonance seems like an odd thing to come back with, you know. But resonance is part of the path to reparation, I guess I would say, and so we don't have any alternative to that, and music is I mean, obviously I've got problems with music because I live with music in this very compulsive and strange way, and I'm constantly immersed in it anyway, in everything that I'm doing, and I'm bereft without it. But so I think for me, music is one of those things that is a kind of constant opportunity to find more resonant forms of being.
And we need it more than ever now, that's for sure.
Okay, I've got a two-parter on a kind of music and politics theme. The first is a dispatch from the front lines of Brooklyn in 2020, which notes that the uprisings in New York during 2020, the people were in the streets, and the streets were pulsing and pounding with music and collective improvisation. Brooklyn felt like a revolutionary soundscape. So that's the first part. And then the second one, someone says, your work is very inspiring. How can it influence us during these political, uncertain times to resist systems and individuals who want to bring us back to the past?
Again, it's one of those things where the thing is just I think it's just to find your space, to get on with it. You know, it's small. It's about being small, not necessarily being big. I think it's about being small, whatever you could do, you know, cook a good bloody meal, you know, talk to a friend. Now it sounds very corny, you know, an obvious thing to say, but these are the things that I think which are much more important. I mean, for me recently, again, it's just, you know, one of those, it's just things which I feel which you can grab and hold on to. Not the things which are out of your reach, which are things which are in reach, which you can make better. End of story. I think that's the best thing.
I mean, I'd say that one of the other things we can begin to try to do, and this relates actually to your description of working with the musicians in the space, one of the reasons that they can do that with you in that manner, and it be so exhilarating, is because they're listening to each other. And they're listening to each other in this really extraordinary way, and that you can, if you don't already know, or you don't want to cultivate your capacity for attention. I mean, we know about the attention economy is monetized your attention and blah, 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 blah. But I'm talking about working to cultivate a certain kind of attentiveness that's very common among people who make music together, and perhaps among people who make music more generally. So I would say the thing to do is to learn to listen deeply and relearn to listen, learn to be attentive in the new kinds of ways that are going to be demanded by the perils that are ahead. And the other thing I'd say is that one of the biggest problems we have is that the future has been foreclosed, or it feels like the future has been foreclosed. And not just by political things, but obviously by the way that the climate crisis determines so many of our experiences. So I would actually say that there has to be, in a sense, there has to be a way of restoring the capacity to imagine a future, even if it means a future of privation or a future of loss or a future of renunciation. All of those things are steps towards repair, they're steps towards the possibility of reparation on many, many levels. So I think we have to open the future. We have to be able to make people. we have to feed the forms of imagination that make the future, or restore the future, or repair the future. That's what I see what you have to do.
We have two more. One's pretty simple. Is a release one of the main experiences you wish for us to have? And how do you go about creating that release?
No. So, you know, I know. I think it's more to do with a certain sense of familiarity, unrecognizable but familiar, or familiar and unrecognizable. Basically, it's right underneath your nose. It's right underneath your nose. It's under your bed. You know, it's not in the far-flung. You know, it's not that distant. It's right in front of you. And that's it. You just have to recognize it. That's all. To get there is in the story, but it's not that far away.
Well, that actually speaks back to the previous question about what was going on in Brooklyn in 2020, and so the question is not whether that can happen, because as you say, that's under your bed or in front of you, but it's a question of how you cultivate it and maintain it and stabilize it. And it's not a flash that just lights up the darkness for a moment, but it's something that can be held on to.
It's sustainable, absolutely.
Last question.
Okay, this one's for Steve. Will you ever make the Paul Robeson biopic?
No, I was working with Harry Belafonte. So Harry obviously was his mentor was Paul Robeson, and I had this idea of making a movie about Paul Robeson a long time ago, because Milton, my neighbor, when I was a kid, I had this guy called Milton who was from Grenada as well, and he didn't have any children, and he was one of those people who he was an aeronautical engineer. No, yeah, he worked in Heathrow for British Airways. He was an engineer, and he would always post things in my door. Cuttings, clippings from newspaper. I think because he, if it was about, if it was about what was going on in Kenya, or it was Maurice Bishop, in Grenada, in the revolutionary government in Grenada, overthrew this person, or it was the miners' strikes. He'll put it in an envelope for me and put it in letterbox. And one day, Milton put in letterbox this anniversary pamphlet from Welsh miners, and it was this black guy on front of it. Was Paul Robeson, and I was 12 years old. Who's Paul Robeson? Who's this black American guy on this Welsh miners pamphlet, sort of a 20th anniversary commemorance of Paul Robeson? And ever since then, I just was so fascinated with this Paul Robeson, and that's when I got into it. And then I was thinking of making a picture about him. I got with Harry, but I don't know. It was one of those things where, things. I was very passionate about it, but then at a certain point, it just became a little bit impossible. And again, it's a little bit of complications there, but it just became impossible. And it's one of those things which how things end and one door closes, another one opens. Well, that's what happened with that. So yeah. So there you go. No.
But you do have the work that looks at all those redacted files.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So,
I made my Paul Robeson picture. Yeah. It's called End Credits, which I did with Donna in the Whitney. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. So in fact I made it. It was the FBI. So basically what I did was. So one night I was just fascinated. I just wanted to find out about Paul Robeson and his FBI file. So I just got all these sort of this research in, and I got all these FBI files on Paul Robeson, and this really is incredible. And what I did with the documents, oh my God, I think it's 72 hours. So basically, I got these actors to read out all of Paul's FBI files, and they were I think since from 1938 or 36 to 1978, 2 years after he died, there was files on Paul. So I got these 5 actors to read all of his FBI files, and basically, because what I loved about the FBI files is there was like end credits, because it was this whole idea of these things which were redacted, but there was just, it was hours and hours. So I basically made them into sort of kind of an end credits thing. Anyway, blah blah blah. But it was extraordinary, and I got these 5 actors to read all the files. It's fascinating. So I made the picture. I made it already.
We could go on for much longer, but we're
Can I
going
say one thing about sound? One thing. So yeah, I spent 2 bloody months in this amazing facility, Warner Brothers facility in London. Mixing this sound for this film called Blitz. This mixing this sound, I was loving it. 2 months, only for people to watch it on this. I mean, it's the end. It's the end. Yeah. Never mind.
Thank you both so much.